members of Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, members of the provincial legislatures that are here with us, the Chief Executive Officer of the NYDA, and the executive directors that are with us here today, the General Secretary of the South African Youth Council, and all other youth formations that are with us here today, distinguished guests, our distinguished panelists that are sitting with us here in front, the youth of South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We gather today following a horrific passing of 24 young people in the roads of Limpopo after we commemorated 43 years of the 1976 students' uprising. A painful reminder of the young lives we continue to lose daily due to road accidents in our country. Take this opportunity to send our deepest and heartfelt condolences to the families, the friends, the loved ones, and we also take this opportunity to wish a speedy recovery to those who were injured in that particular accident. As Benjamin Disraeli once said, and I quote, "The youth of a nation are the trustees of posterity," and I close quote. Death has indeed robbed us. His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, a few days ago, we celebrated 43 years of heroic deeds by the generation of 1976. A generation that declared that freedom now, education later. We're proud to stand on the shoulders of such giants. However, we are a generation that is confronting a new struggle, as correctly put when His Excellency President Ramaphosa addressed on the 16th of June this year, and you said, and I quote, "The struggle of today's youth is a struggle for economic freedom, is a struggle for access to land, but also, more importantly, is a struggle for education," and I close quote. The dialogue carries a mammoth task as it takes place ahead of the State of the Nation address. Young men and women are afforded a chance to directly talk unto their hopes and aspirations. They have a responsibility to speak live to the fact that the world population is expected to increase rapidly, with prospects of world population reaching 9.6 billion by 2050. Honorable President, the young people gathered here are delighted to have an opportunity to exchange views on the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, the prospects and threats to the future of work, and how government plans to grow the economy through an inclusive economy with the youth at the epicenter of the country's trajectory. Many young people have joined this session as entrepreneurs who are here to ask for the removal of unnecessary red tapes when it comes to doing business. Young people, President, are saying that it is important for the country to create a conducive environment for young people to have thriving businesses. We've seen on many occasions that there's an engagement with business, with private business, and stimulus packages are offered, tax incentive schemes. But in all those particular discussions, young people are left on the outside. It is young people that must form part of those discussions, because it is young people that are today innovators. It is young people that are today people who can actually think about what the future prospects of this country must hold. But most importantly, Honorable President, when you look at the country's entire procurement budget, we've simply asked that at least let's take 35% of that amount, set it aside for youth-owned enterprises, so that young people are able to enter the economy and able to participate meaningfully in the economy. We want to see young millionaires. We want to see young millionaires. It can be that when you talk about millionaires, when you talk about billionaires, when you talk about industrialists, young people are on the outside. And I think the moment has come for us to come together and have that conversation and say, let's create a conducive environment for young people. Let's remove the red tape. Let's stop sending young people from pillar to post just for them to access funding. Let's remove from sending young people from pillar to post just for them to say, my business idea needs to work. And I think it's a conversation that we need to have. Comrade President, the unemployed graduates are also here to ascertain the promise made by your good self, Mr. President, that, and I quote, we are on a mission to support young people entering the labor market by growing new and future jobs and by giving them the opportunity to serve their communities and contribute to the growth of the economy. And of course, my President, you have agreed that experience must be removed as an entry-level requirement. Honorable President, the new Dawn's promise to work with social partners, organized labor, business, and civil society to solve the challenges of youth unemployment in a sustainable manner is welcomed. Young people living with disabilities.
All right, so that's the chairperson of National Youth Development Agency, NYDA's Fiso Mtweni at that youth in Indaba. As you may have seen, the president is there. Of course, you've got the minister responsible for the young people as well, and a number of well-known young people in South Africa to participate in that Indaba.
Yes, indeed. The youth, of course, featuring quite predominantly throughout Youth Month in South Africa at this time. And that is another one of those dialogues taking place with the President. And we'll be crossing back there in a short while, particularly as the President begins to address those gathered there. We're going to take a quick break though.
We'll see you at the top of the hour when we begin to tell your story.
We can never have a conversation about this country without including young people living with disabilities. Young people living with disabilities cannot be excluded. They cannot be a by the way. They have to be critical stakeholders that we are with every day, that we are working with, and we're very happy and we're proud of you, Masengita, and we want to say to you, continue inspiring young people out there. I'm delighted to mention that in our midst, we're also joined by winners of the South African Youth Awards. What the NYDA has done is that at times, when we talk about young people in South Africa, we tend to paint a grim picture. We tend to paint as if every single young person is despondent, the country has got nothing positive to tell, whereas there are young people day to day who wake up and contribute towards creating South Africa to be a better place. We continuously follow a narrative that is displayed every day. When you open newspapers, when you see street polls, it's a picture that is painted as if South Africa is a lost land. We want to say South Africa is not a lost land. The only thing we are saying is that let's open for more young people to be able to enter the space. Today, we've got young people who have been honored as winners of the South African Awards. But at the same time, we will be joined by one person who won the season of One Day Leader, another program that is sponsored by the NYDA, because the NYDA believes that we must be able to engineer future leaders of our country. So much so, President, that the NYDA is so excellent in producing young leaders that even you did not have a choice but to take the deputy chairperson of the NYDA and put her into cabinet. Yeah. As we close and open officially this session, there was once said, and I quote, "Youth development is arguably the next and biggest frontier of responsive and evidence-based public policy, making of the sixth administration." It means, President, this dialogue is one thing that we welcome wholeheartedly. But we want to say, President, that young people cannot be in the spotlight in June alone. Youth development must be a 365 days a year process, because we don't become youth because it's June. We must be part of the discussions going forward. There used to be a presidential working group on youth where we would meet quarterly, with different ministers, would meet quarterly with different deputy ministers, because each and every department must account what is it that they are doing for the youth. Because issues of youth development, they cut across. When you talk about social development, young people are affected. Talk about basic education, higher education, young people are affected. When you talk about labor, young people are affected. When you talk about sports and recreation, young people are affected. Today here, we've got young people from the arts and culture space. A young Cornet Mamabulo, a young person who acts on a TV series called Skim Sam. This particular young person has been able to go back to his village and build a brand new library for the young people there. But there needs to be a bigger discussion about young people in the arts and culture space, because we tend to overlook a very important critical sector of our economy. The arts and culture space, particularly the entertainment space, has been there for many years. In fact, even the fight against apartheid, we were able to utilize our heroes who were musicians, who were actors, who were able to tell the story of South Africa. But today, you've got artists who entertain us every day. When we open televisions, they're there without fail, and yet when these young people fall out of favor, they no longer have money. When they die poor, meaning that that particular industry is exploiting these young people, and that thing must come to an end. The entertainment industry must be an industry where young people will be able to showcase their skills and talents in a manner that will be able to sustain their lives. Young people must dream about becoming musicians. They must dream about becoming actors. They must dream like those young people who won an Oscar award, like Java, who won an international award, like AKA, who won the Kids Comic Awards, like Bonang, who won as an international influencer. And that's what we want to see. We want to see future Bonangs. We want to see future Yvonne Chagachagas and everybody else. And we want to say the arts and culture space must come into the spotlight, and we must be able to move our country forward. With those few words, I welcome everyone here. Let's relax. It's a dialogue with the president. It's not a complaint session. What we are here to do, don't complain that you expected a grant, it did not arrive. No. If you're expecting a grant and it did not arrive, just call us on the side. We'll quickly facilitate it. But what we are here to do, the president tomorrow will deliver a State of the Nation address. Now, this State of the Nation address is delivered during Youth Month. And it was important that as young people from different walks of life, we've got young people from high schools, we've got young people from different formation NGOs, young people from civil society, from business, all of you must constructively engage the president and say, President, this is what we as the youth of this country think you need to concentrate on. As the youth of this country, we think that this is the direction that this country needs to take. It's 25 years of our democracy today. In the next 25 years, this is how we are going to shape this country to go forward. And I can promise you, you've seen that he's a listening president. Ne? When I came and said, remove experience, he came and removed experience. Yeah. When we came and said, do this, he does that. So one thing that we are saying, President, is that introduce a compulsory national youth service program in South Africa. South Africa is one of the few countries where we don't have a compulsory national youth service program, but we'll continue to engage with you, and I'm confident that all the views of young people will be captured in the State of the Nation address. So you are all welcomed. Please feel free. Please relax. I've got panelists here in front who represent different interests in our country. Next to me, I've got Kaya Sitole, one of the young chartered accountants in this country. He's also a radio personality. One of the big things that Kaya did was to spotlight the plight of black chartered accountants in the industry. He fought a heroic battle. At one point, they wanted to even disbar him. They wanted to remove him. And as young people, we went there and said, it's not going to happen. He must continue to expose if there are instances where young people are actually exploited. Next to him, We've got Cornet Mamabolo, Kwaus Kim Sam, Kwabarki Tibos. It's Tibos, ne? Who watches Kim Sam here? Yes. There's Tibos. As I said, we also have Kamagwini Nomnongo. She represents a community that today also has been put outside, but we are bringing back. She represents the LGBTQI community. So she represents them. She's also going to speak. So without wasting time, Deputy Chair, you are no longer in the NYT here, please. Oh, yes, and we also have Aisha Pando, a very brilliant young person who's also going to come and share with us a perspective of the youth in business. So this is a young entrepreneur, a young person that represents those youth in business. She's actually going to come here and share ideas. So the format that we're going to follow is this. These young panelists are going to come and address you and say a few things within a short space of time. As soon as they are done, we are going to open to you to speak to the president and say what you think the president must reflect on in the state of the nation. After we've done that, we'll allow His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa to come and address you as young people of this country. So without wasting any further time, let's start with Kaya here next to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good evening to everyone, and good evening to the President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. Feels good to say that. Oh. Mr. President, I think probably the key thing that we need to ventilate out here is that, of course, we are sitting here today 25 years into what really became the breakthrough moment of the country. The thing about a 25-year moment is that, of course, it is not because you and I can say so, but it really becomes validated when young people of the country can feel it. And I think the key issue that we need to try and deal with is, do the young people of the country that are born into this nation today feel that this country is something that offers opportunities for them? And if it doesn't offer such opportunities, what do we need to do in order to get it there? And I thought to really summarize the key issues that I'd like to put to you, I'd really like to summarize it across two sort of structures. And for me, it's really the question of how do we then reinforce the strong correlations that already exist and also confront the paralyzing tensions that do exist. Now, when I speak about the strong correlations that do exist here, everyone talks about the youth unemployment crisis, and they think that is a thing that we need to deal with. But of course, the question that has to be asked is, how did we end up with the crisis in the first place? And for me, these things really represent a triangulation of a few issues. There are particular intersections, but the reality here is that we all have a pursuit of social mobility as the one thing that we want to be able to get to. We all wish and we are desperate for some form of economic participation. And of course, we do have a crisis of the waning political legitimacy, where suddenly young people do not bother to register to vote, and when they do register, they don't show up at the ballot. This is something that really forces us to question whether it is waning as a system of getting change to be done. The key issue, of course, is that if we're going to change these things, we need to be able to be futuristic in our endeavors. And being futuristic in our endeavors requires us to be very brave. And occasionally, it's difficult to be brave when you've got an electorate that doesn't always understand what it is you're trying to achieve. Let us look at what the strong correlations that do exist are. If I'm going to talk about young people being unemployed, I need to be able to ask the question, what can one do in order to solve that crisis? And we all know there are very strong correlations between quality, basic and early childhood education with very good educational outcomes. We know that correlation already exists, so we must actually amplify it. One of the key things that people probably don't know about you is the work that you did before you became president. And I'm glad that Done is sitting here, because I'm going to tell you a story that she probably wishes I wouldn't tell. So after I left UKZN, as Fiso was trying to allude to, the first thing that happened when I moved to Johannesburg is that I went to confront him. Because you may not remember this, but you funded a program called the AMS program at UKZN, and there was a guy, his name is Cyril Madiba, so there was always a Cyril connection there. And when I got to Wits University, the first thing that I did is that I went to Doné and then I said, look, I know the work that you've done back then. What can I do here? But Doné decided to be very, very weird in that she then sent me to the office of Puti, and Puti said, well, you've done education, now deal with entrepreneurship. So I got involved in Shanduya Black Umbrellas from 2014. The reason I need to bring this up is that, again, when people are going to talk about the fact that entrepreneurship is a problem, I know a fact that you know the strong correlations that exist between incubation agencies and the ability of young people with business ideas to actually make them thrive. The challenge I want to put to you is that it is wrong for me to be able to tell the story from my own perspective. It is wrong for me to be able to tell this story because I was once able to walk into Doné's office and Puti's office. These things should become universal in South Africa. Similarly, for a lot of people that speak about the basic education system, I'm going to expose you again. A couple of years ago, there was this realization where some people were saying, what has happened in the Free State because the matric results suddenly became a thing. And then I spoke to some people in the education space, and then I said, can we actually expose the fact that the Kagiso Shanduga Trust has done monumental work in the Free State in order to get us there? And somebody said to me, no, you cannot say that because people will then say, why is he only doing it in one province? Why is it not becoming universal? But now you are the president, so it can be universal. So these are the things that you need to be able to do. Similarly, when people sit here, they're probably not aware, but you also probably have forgotten this, that you are the patron of the National Education Collaboration Trust. And the work that the NECT has done in the basic education space, the problem, of course, is that the type of work that one has to do behind the scenes is very long-term in nature. So nobody can actually say that you go to the NECT meeting once a year and these are the changes. It's a 12 to 15-year investment. The problem with 12 to 15-year investments is that human beings, unfortunately, are very impatient. And when human beings are asking questions today, trust me, you're going to struggle to say to them, come back in 15 years' time. But the problem is, how do we then continuously monitor and evaluate the impact of the work that is being done behind the scenes so that we can articulate to the country at large what the long-term goals and what the long-term impact is? And I think that the government has always struggled with the question of monitoring, evaluation, and actually then explaining to the public what's going on. There you go, Minister Mthembu, that's your challenge. Of course, when we do start talking about the question of strong correlations, we know very well that there are even stronger correlations between access to higher education and the ability to obtain a sustainable job. Sustainable employment is intrinsically linked to the ability of young people to get into the higher education system. We know the correlations exist. Let us make sure that they actually work. And I think the big thing with the new administration is that everybody has this expectation that it's going to walk into the union buildings and completely overhaul everything that exists. We quite simply do not have the latitude to do so. We need to be able to take a moment and say, all the policies and all the frameworks that have been put in them were put in good faith. If they were put in good faith, what exactly is the reason for the gap between the policy directives and the policy ideals and the actual outcomes and the effects, particularly on young people? And for me, that becomes the challenge of any administration. Your job is not to rewrite what exists out there. We know what is out there. The question is here is how do you actually make it work in a way that any person walking on the street can be able to say, look, it might not have cascaded into my personal circumstances yet, but I can see what the master plan is. And unfortunately, with big government, there tends to be a very, very weak articulation of what it is that is going on, and that really calls into question the legitimacy of the projects that do get undertaken. So for me, I think that becomes the big challenge that you need to put out there. And lastly, of course, we need to be able to talk about the question of articulation. And one of the things that was quite important, as Fiso highlighted, is the idea that, experience has been removed as a barrier to access to employment. But when that announcement was made last year by Minister Ayanda Dlodlo, I go on radio, obviously. And the first thing that I said was that, that is one part of the conversation. You need to be able to say that you are going to remove that as a core requirement for people entering the workplace. But equally importantly, you need to be able to go back to the labor market itself and say, but why was experience a requirement in the first place? And the answer, of course, is that if I'm an employer, there is something that we refer to as the cost of onboarding. The cost of onboarding is that a young person comes into my workplace and they say, I've got this particular degree. So then I've got particular expectations on what that person is able to do at the entry level. When they're unable to do that, I'm going to gravitate towards saying that, look, I don't have the time to actually teach that young person those particular skills, so therefore let me choose a person who's already had exposure to those skills. So it is really that articulation between the world of work and the world of education that requires us to revisit it. Again, you don't need to write a new script here. We've got, I think, 21 seaters whose particular job should be to say, does the articulation exist between the world of work and the world of education? And if it doesn't exist, how do we bridge that gap? There is no need to write a new script. It's a question of asking the people that already have the mandate to ask them exactly what they've done to execute on those particular mandates. We have a lot of instruments of making things happen in this country. The problem is that we are not using them effectively. And when we do use them effectively, we do not have the wherewithal to be able to say, this is why this instrument exists, and this is why we think it should be implemented. And if it doesn't work out in that way, we should have the honesty and the moral courage to go back and say that perhaps this is not the way to do things. One of the big risks that we face as a country is really the question of how people that enter the higher education system end up not exiting it. And of course, we need to be able to go back and remember that we still have a very rigid higher education system. I used to work at a university where we would take people who don't even have matric mathematics, and then the challenge would be, can you be a chartered accountant? The answer is usually no, and then I said, I'm going to prove you wrong. And ironically, all the students that got into that program, having not done maths and matric, they all work for the public sector now because that's what you need to get them to do. So the key thing here is that we need to be able to take a step back and say, it is a monumental waste of money if we put people into the system and when they can't succeed in that system, we kick them out. We need to be able to say to a young person, you might have entered the university thinking that you wanted to get a degree, but should you not be able to do so, here's an exit certificate. Should it be a diploma or higher certificate, so that you can at least say, I went into the system and this is what I got out of it. Currently, the system is designed to really eject people and leave them with nothing to do. There is nothing more painful than a young person signing up for a 4-year engineering degree, doing well in the first 3 years, and not doing well in the 4th year, and then exiting with absolutely nothing to show for them. So we need to be able to find a way to say, how do we actually find a way to make that articulation much stronger? And I think, of course, if we're going to be able to understand what's going to get this country to thrive, what you want to be able to create is an ecosystem. A lot of people say that, young people must be entrepreneurs. But of course, that works well in a country where the culture of entrepreneurship is intrinsic. A person should be able to go to one particular area, whether that's the Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone, and say, I've got an idea. And that person should have the freedom to experiment with that idea. We all know that statistically, you're not going to get 100% success rate in entrepreneurship. But the more you widen the pool, no matter what the output rate is, it means that a lot more people are going to be able to succeed. So, Mr. President, before I exit the stage, I really do think that your administration's duty is not to rewrite the script, but it to simply identify the correlations that already exist and make sure that we get the best outcomes out of them. It's not going to be a universal success overnight, but all young people are asking for is simply a roadmap. They need to be able to say that it might not have translated into my immediate financial circumstances. It hasn't turned out to be an immediate social windfall for me, but I can understand what the government of the day is doing in order to improve my prospects as a member of society. I thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to call on Anisha Pando, who will also give us a perspective from youth in business. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Aisha Pando, and I'm the co-founder of a company called Sweep South, which is a technology company. Welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for allowing me to give my input as a young person. It's just in time because I'm 34 this year, so next year I won't classify as a youth, so thank you for inviting me this year. So I'm just going to share a little bit of my experience starting a business, and particularly a tech business in the country, and talk practically about some of the challenges and successes that we've had. So just to give an introduction into what my business does, we sometimes are referred to as the Uber for home services, but the description that I prefer is that we help domestic workers who are underemployed or unemployed through a technology platform, through an app, to find work and to get connected to customers and to potential employers. I started the business 5 years ago along with my co-founder, who's our CTO, and I came from the academic space first, so finishing a PhD in genetics, and then working in the corporate space, but really feeling as a young person who was involved in the corporate sphere that I wasn't being able to make a contribution to the challenges that the country faces, and I didn't have the freedoms to try and put the potential and the education that I had to good use in trying to solve some of the challenges that the country faces. And so I decided to quit my job and started this business. And we started in 2014, so 5 years ago. To fund the business, I cashed in my pension. I'd made a decent salary as a management consultant, cashed in my entire pension, cashed in all of my savings, sold my house to fund the business and bootstrapped it. And eventually got investment, and at the point now where 5 years later we've employed 12,500 domestic workers in the country. We have 50 employees, many of whom we've taken just out of varsity or very early in their careers and upskilled them with the use of technology. We're operating in 7 cities in the country. When we launched, we were cleaning homes, helping to clean or service homes for a few customers a month. We're now doing about 50,000 bookings a month, and we're on track to make about 100 million rands in revenue over the next year. So, and I think our story really speaks about the ability of tech, and I think that's my thing, the ability of technology to create impact and to accelerate the effects that we're trying to have on education and on job creation. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've had. And some of those things have fortunately been changed over the past 5 years. So it's not all gloom and doom. It's not a bad story. But there definitely are some things which still need work. So some of the challenges that I had in starting up our business, firstly, just registering a business 5 years ago was incredibly hard. It took me almost 2 months just to register a business with SABC and to open a bank account. Getting a loan was absolutely out of the question from the bank. There was no way they were going to loan any money to a first-time business owner and a young person. And it was extremely frustrating. And I know there are countries where people are able to set up businesses within a few hours. So that's one of the things that we need to address to make starting a business a lot easier for young people. It's incredibly hard to run a business. It shouldn't be hard just to set a business up. And then funding itself was a challenge for us, and which is why we ended up bootstrapping our business. So trying to get funding from, and we did actually apply to the NYDA and were rejected. Your loss. Your loss. But funding is incredibly difficult for young people, and we ended up raising angel investment from entrepreneurs, South African entrepreneurs who had started technology businesses themselves. And so we got a combination of two things. The one is that we got money into our business to grow the business, but we also had the experience of people who had done this themselves, who'd grown technology businesses, who'd exited those businesses, who'd made money, and then who came on to both invest in us and to mentor us. And so one thing that is working very well in that space is the introduction of the Section 12J tax incentives. That's worked really well in getting people who have capital to invest to be incentivized to invest in young businesses and in venture capital. But I think the next phase now that we need to look at is now that we have these growing businesses. My business is 5 years old. I need to find investors who know not just how to start tech businesses, but how to grow tech businesses. And that takes investment sometimes from outside of South Africa. We know that there are many other technology ecosystems that are a lot more mature than ours and from whom we can learn. And so we need to be able to attract investment from foreign investors, and they need to not see South Africa as a place that's risky, as a place where they're not able to get any of that IP out, obviously in the right ways, if they want to invest in businesses that want to expand outside of the country. And then they also need to, we need to look at the way that people are taxed. And if heavy tax burdens are a disincentive to foreign investors, we need to look at how to balance that, again, in correct ways so that people aren't taking advantage. But we need to incentivize foreign investors to be investing in local businesses. And then other challenges that we had, so skills gaps, a really big challenge. As a young person starting up a business, I'd never done this before. And I'm hiring people who are also young people. You're facing many, many challenges. It's difficult just to grow a business anyways. And I've got a young team, an inexperienced team. And particularly in the tech space, there aren't many people in this country who have grown and exited tech businesses. So skills gaps and the ability to hire people who are more skilled than me in many cases, which is what we need, has been a real challenge for us. And so I think we also, again, need to try and look at who internationally are people who have skills in growing businesses, who are the people who've worked at the Googles, the Facebooks, and who've had that experience, are willing to come into the country on limited visas, come and impart their skills to young people who can then put those skills into the local marketplace, and who can help in that regard. I think vitally important. And then economic growth. So being a business that caters to customers, and to it's a B2C business. My customers are ordinary South Africans. When people are faced with the pressures of another fuel increase, inflation going up, the cost of things going up, salaries not going up correspondingly, not increasing real time, it has an impact on businesses that want to cater to the populace of South Africa. So economic growth, and I know this from my other peers who have businesses in the same space, have had an incredibly big impact on businesses like ours and our ability to grow. So as I said, it's not gloom and doom. There have been some positive things, many positive things that have come out of running and growing a business in South Africa. The first is that we have lots and lots of young people who are incredibly energetic, who have a lot of potential, who want to work. I think it's a fallacy that South African youth don't want to work, are lazy. People want to work. They want to work. People are skilled. They have potential. They're intelligent young people in this country. And so that's been a big benefit of the market that we've worked in. There are so more funding being available. As I said, early stage funding, I don't think any business today, any new starting business today, can say that there isn't funding available in South Africa, but we need growth funding. So it's easy to start a business, to grow a business is hard, so we need growth funding to be available to young people. And then I think another success is, we talk about fourth industrial revolution, which for someone who's in the tech space, it's a bit of a buzzword, sorry. But the positive of that is the fact that we are talking about tech and the ability of tech to help solve the problems that the country is facing, and also to solve problems internationally. So that's a good thing, because I think, as I said, technology is this great facilitator that allows you to grow and scale businesses faster than ever before. And if we as a country are recognizing the role that technology can play, that's a good sign. My business is, as I said, it's an Uber model, it's a sharing economy model. And I just played around with some of the numbers. So we've helped over 5 years, 12,500 people to find jobs. If you can support 200 businesses like ours over the next 5 years, you're effectively creating job opportunities for 2.5 million people. That's 40% of South Africa's unemployed basis. So it's an incredible number. 200 is not a big number. We didn't need that much funding. So I think it's vitally important. I think just to end off, tech is the future, digital is the future, but the people who at the moment are creating that future are the people who run Facebook, Google, Microsoft. Facebook's just announced that they're going to be introducing a new currency, and they're aiming it at emerging markets. These are the people who are taking over the world. And the sad thing is that these people don't look like me. They don't look like the people in this room. So if we're not involved, if we're not sponsoring people who are involved, not just in consuming, but in building technology, we're going to be left behind. So, yeah, that's just my parting note. Thank you.
Wow. Just a small correction there. It's important to correct. The NYDA couldn't afford you. That's why we want it to be an institution that affords you. But thank you. I think that was quite excellent. His Excellency President, I did indicate earlier that there's a show we've run for the last 8 to 10 years on the national broadcaster called One Day Leader, where we go to the length and breadth of South Africa, get young people to come and share their ideas with the country in terms of how to resolve some of the problems that we're having. Today, There's a young lady here. She was a president of the SRC at the University of Johannesburg. Part of what was called the Fees Must Fall movement, was part of the show, and became the first female winner of the show. So her name is Anissa Mazimpaka. She's going to just come here and share ideas from that particular perspective. Please, let's welcome her.
Good evening. Amandla! Amandla! Awethu! Thank you very much. Greetings to His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, Program Director, fellow panelists and audience at large, and the nation, fellow youth as well. So firstly, Mr. President, I must say, I'm trying to breathe properly. It is a great honor to actually share this platform with you. And just as per recent developments, I'd like to say that we share something in common. We both cannot dance. As Mr. President, on a more serious note, as the daughter of the soil, is it true? As the daughter of the soil, I stand before you to speak on core issues that affect our people, the youth who form a very large population of this country. I stand before you today not just to represent myself as Anissa Mazimpaka, but resonating with the realities of the ground and the struggles that the fellow youth face. Mr. President, allow me to congratulate you as the head of the country, as well as the previous administrations post-1994, for the tremendous work that you have done for the youth to boost and assist us with initiatives such as the YES initiatives. But the truth of the matter is that I could stand here the whole day and go through that, but I wouldn't be doing justice to myself, to my fellow youth, and to my beloved country at large if I were not to tell you the truth of what is happening on the ground. President, I'm from the ground, and it has become a battlefield that just keeps sucking in our youth into a dark hole. Youth unemployment is a burning issue as declared a national crisis by yourself. But surprisingly, this isn't where it all begins, and I will unpack this. Our schools have become a slaughter playhouse, a playground of kids stabbing and killing each other. Our townships are slowly becoming dormitories of unemployment, Nyaupe infested, and our institutions of higher learning, Mr. President, are becoming institutions of insanity, where our mental well-beings at these institutions have to always be cautioned, but unfortunately they're now being normalized, and especially for the black kid that has to think about the black tax and the unemployment crisis that surrounds them when they do conclude. You see, Mr. President, my personal philosophy is that of social justice through education. And it is through social justice, through education, that will tell you that these issues that we faced today are systematic injustices. But how do we move forward in doing this? President, this month is of great importance as it signifies the struggles of those who came before us and what they went through, the likes of Tsietsi Mashinini and his cohort. But what I find fundamentally aggravating as a youth in this manner is that we celebrate our fallen heroes of 1976. But I won't lie, as millennials, we celebrate this, but we discovered a few years ago our generational mission, our generational mandate, as Fanon said, was that of fees to fall. We did that, we took to the streets, but we met the generation of 1976 in the streets, and they shot at us. Mr. President, this is how we celebrate our Youth Month, but for me, I cannot completely and fully celebrate it when activists who partook in Fees Must Fall still either are suspended from the institutions, they are expelled from the institutions, they are still attending hearings, court appearances, Mr. President, and some still even linger in jail, Mr. President. So I'd like to take this platform to personally ask you in this month, Youth Month, to please, Mr. President, grant your presidential pardon, because we are fighting for our future, Mr. President. on unemployment, education, and decolonization. You see, unemployment, once again, is deeply rooted in the outcomes of the state of our historic, systematic, and institutional injustices and inequalities that South Africa faces, and this we can see in our Gini coefficient, together with the concoction of generational privileges, which we see play out. This too is linked with the future emergence of the 4.0, the so-called fourth industrial revolution that we have all been talking about. But the pertinent question is, are our institutions of higher learning preparing us for jobs that do not exist with the coming of the fourth industrial revolution? Mr. President, our economic freedom cannot be achieved without the emancipation of the mind, Mr. President. Our curriculums need to be decolonized, Mr. President, where at an early stage we are taught about your Robert Sobukwes, your Bram Fishers, your Ruth First, your Steve Biko, your Joe Slovo, and of course, Umama Winnie Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela, and the list is endless. Mr. President, you see, my parents did not just teach me how to talk without solutions, but they taught me to be solution-oriented, which is what I'm going to touch on a bit. So what I suggest, Mr. President, or things that we have been engaging on the ground, Mr. President, is to curb this issue of unemployment amongst the youth, Mr. President. It will not happen tomorrow, but the first steps that we can take is to build cities, but more especially township hubs and economies, right? Where we give back townships the economy, where townships own this economy, where their money flows through the township, is owned by them. They spend, they own, and they earn, Mr. President. We need to give them back this power so that we can generate and circulate this, Mr. President, and also to create a domestic influx and inflow of the rand and the currency. Mr. President, with institutions of higher learning, we also need to incorporate what is called the Varsity Economy, which is something that my branch, where I come from, the University of Johannesburg, Bunting Road campus. So we've always spoken about what is called a Varsity Economy. So at Varsity, what they don't tell us is, yes, we'll be there for 3-4 years or more, but if we're taught things like entrepreneurship and where students can now take on this Varsity Economy, where students no longer give services to external service providers, but they keep the services within themselves as students, then we'll find entrepreneurships, tomorrow's leaders, tomorrow's CEOs of companies exit that university, not just with the qualification, but also with skills, Mr. President. Mr. President, to intensify this, Mr. President, and the practicality of this, we'd also like to intensify the call for work integrated learning, Mr. President. So you go to varsity and you're absorbed by a company whilst you study for those 3 years, which then solves the crisis of this work experience, of course, which was scrapped out and which was mentioned, yes. Thank you so much for that. Yes, so we then also create and prepare ourselves for the practicality part of the theoretical courses that we do, Mr. President. Also, we need to promote our up-and-coming artists that we see in either our high schools or we see in our varsity spaces. But most importantly, as I conclude, Mr. President, our formation into the BRICS Union, alongside with the signed Africa Free Trade Agreement, with South Africa standing as a gateway to Africa, Mr. President. I think if we can use this strategically so and channel the youth to be incorporated into these spheres, to be incorporated into these spaces, and we open up not just South Africa, but the continent, and we show them our skills, Mr. President, if we can use these formations, then I think we'll be not only promoting an African brand, but we'll also, first and foremost, be promoting a South African brand where we champion our national interests on an international scale. To my fellow youth, I think some of you who are sitting here are quite young, but those who grew up watching Sarafina, I'd just like to say, which played a few days ago, by the way, I love you so much, but as we can see, we've been watching this growing up. And the cast of Sarafina have beautifully aged. And we cannot continue to sing, freedom is coming tomorrow. Our freedom starts now, and it starts with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anisha. You'll forgive me from time to time. I'll just correct a few things so that we're fine. One thing that I need to quickly correct, beautiful speech, wonderful, but small correction. Here we have one of the best dancers in the president. And I'll tell you why. When the president was called to come and dance with one of our prolific artists, I took an opportune moment to go and show the world that here we have a president that can do a for show. Because president, we were watching here when there was members being sworn in here in parliament. All of us watching, sitting in our couches, some of us cringed when people said they are doing a for show, but they were doing frog jumps, others they were limping, going there, saying that they are doing for show. So I needed to come, President, and show the Republic, show the continent that not only can you do a vosho, you can also do a tusopala. As a result, President, a lot of embassies have been calling me. Apparently, presidents of other countries are calling for my services to come and assist. So, that is corrected, President. You are protected on this one. You are very much protected. Anyone who asks you, call me. Going to protect them. On that note, let's call a young person in the art space. So people who do these things every day, who are in the art space, the entertainment space, to really come and share with us his own view. Please, let's welcome Cornet Mamabul.
Toel. Legay. Aron. My name is Cornet Tavisoma Mawolo. I'm an artist, an entrepreneur, and a philanthropist. I'm a president of a foundation called Cornet M Foundation. We just recently built and donated a library in the village called Ramolepo Marapatagum. And next month we will be also opening a science center in a place called Sokhosese. We're in partnership with another foundation that is led by a young gentleman called Cyril Ramaphosa. All of this is just through contributions from individuals and contributions from ourselves. And we would like to also ask the president to contribute. I'm an artist. Minisho called schemes, as a lot of you would know. And I would just like to share an experience of how one has started in the industry, which I think is a narrative that is common to a lot of young people out there. You see, art is storytelling. So everything that comes after that, which is any medium, is just a secondary thing. And you only get it right if you go back to the basics, and those basics are basics of storytelling. Arts is also in the rural areas and in the townships and not in the cities, which takes me to my points here of what we are lacking. We are lacking opportunities, platforms. We are lacking security for artists. to the rural areas, and they should be taken to the townships. There's one show that I would actually like to give reference to, which is Uzalo, and I would like to commend the channel and the government that made that possible for them to shoot in KZN. And that's what should start happening when it comes to shows where if it's a story depicted in the township or in the rural area, if it ever develops to become a telenovela or a soapy, it should be told from those rural areas and townships to empower those economies. We need to build more theaters. We need to build more theaters, commercial theaters in the townships and rural areas. We need to invest more financially in community radio stations. We need to invest more in community television stations, because that's where also stories comes from. That's where you have a lot of young people trying to be innovative and come up with new stories. The problem is there's no financial muscle in those radio stations and theaters. The other thing that I just need to touch on, Mr. President, is that our industry is not properly regulated. And now, as a result, artists are robbed of their royalties. I know with SABC, they do give royalties to artists. I don't know about other imaging channels. I don't know if they do that. But that needs to be given priority. We also need to also speak on the issues of the contracts that artists sign. We need to come up with a standard format that is able to protect artists. A lot of our peers, they become big, they become celebrated, but few years down the line, a story always comes that they're not getting anything from their work. And that needs to come to an end. The conditions in the working environment, that also need to be looked at, and it can only be corrected if we are more regulated. And production houses and channels are now being forced, if they can be forced, to adhere to those conditions. We know recently there's a topic that has been trending, and it's about opening up the industry. And young people are crying about the industry, that few people are given opportunities, that only one artist is seen in different shows or is being played more on radio. Those are issues that are real, that are existing. But the basis of it is because we lack more platforms. If we had more platforms, if we put more money in this community radio stations, we build more theaters in these townships and rural areas, if we expose youth to more opportunities that exist in the industry and tell them that there's industrial theater, there's commercial radio, there's retail radio, there are opportunities available, and they can see that they are paying, they will be able to go to bed with a salary, we wouldn't be having these conversations. But it's because of that lack of platforms that young people end up going out there and crying for the industry to be open. It's a valid thing. The industry needs to be opened. But in order for us to overcome that, we need to create more platforms. The other thing that I just want to touch on is the protection of women, of girls, and youth in the arts. Let's not shy away from it. We know it's there, we know it's happening. But what is it that we are doing? Do we have anything in place that ensures that young women, girls, youth that are entering the industry are not being asked to go to bed with a senior or with the executive producer or with the distribution manager on radio. What is it that is being done? And I think those are the issues that we need to look at. More security need to be put in place for young people, for women, to make sure, and for them to have surety that they can trade without having to have sexual favors with their seniors. There are a lot of young people that start up work, be it festivals, be it visual arts, be it, trainings in the arts. We can all start something. The only issue that we have is the sustainability part of it. And I'm pleading with you, President, that if we can get more support for young people to have grants to sustain their projects, and not once-off things, but budget and support that will ensure that the projects that young people have started in the arts are more sustainable. Ke a leboha.
Right, thanks, Colette. No correction here. Without wasting time, let's call our queen that has gone up Mount Kilimanjaro to come and speak to us. We can do some more. Come on.
Good afternoon. Since we are doing corrections, let me correct. I didn't just climb Kilimanjaro.
Yeah?
I summited. There is a difference between the two. Let me say thank you for the privilege. I want to do something different or start in a different way. Mr. Mtui, you are okay. Is it normal to wear a blanket any time of the day, any season? Normal. Okay. Connect. It's hot. Is it normal to wear a blanket any time of the day, any season? No. Yes or no? Yes or no? That's all I need. Like, it's a no. No, no. Okay. You are two young black men. I gave you the same situation. You gave me two different answers. Who is normal? Yes, the point of my presentation. Normal doesn't exist.
Yes.
Normal is relative. And unfortunately, we live in a world where we look at normal and perfection with ourselves as a point of reference. And when somebody else doesn't look like us, doesn't behave like us, we say they are not normal. Normal depends with your circumstances and your situation. Well, let me proudly say this. To those who tell me I'm abnormal, I tell them, you are right. I'm above normal. Having a disability in South Africa, still 25 years of democracy, it is a brutal experience because disability is still not looked at as a diversity issue. Disability is not a disease like in the apartheid times where it was looked at as a medical model. Some of us have disabilities, but I don't know when was the last time I went to a doctor because I'm not sick. And we need to have that in our mind that disability is not a sickness. I'm a black woman who happens to have a disability. And we need to start treating disability as a diversity issue. And I'm happy, Mr. President, you brought it back within the Women Youth Department because those are diversity issues and they need to be dealt with as such. At the end of the day, we all face the same barriers. The same barriers young people face. I face as a woman. The same barriers black people face. I face as a person with a disability. I always say, being a Mutsonga, people don't call my name correctly. My name is Masingita. People call me Masingita. And when you correct them, somebody will tell you, but in my culture, in my language, and I say, when a white person calls your name incorrectly, you correct them. When they tell you in English, you dispute, but you want to tell me the very same thing that the other person is telling you and you feel it is wrong. Unfortunately, in life, things are wrong only when they are done to us, not when we do it to them. It is time disability issues are brought to the forefront, not as a pity issue, because at the end of the day, I don't go to the shop and they say, action, and they give me the goods. When I get to the shop, whether I've got a disability or not, whether I'm a woman or not, they want their money. I don't get services for free because I have a disability. So sympathy and pity has to stop because it brings nothing, but it strips our dignity day in and day out. So opportunities need to be open for people with disabilities. And I not only speak as a person with a disability, but as a black woman, because, you know, I tell people all the time, being a black woman in South Africa, it's a disability on its own. It is a disability on its own. So I've got double disability. I'm a black woman. And I've seen, I stand here and see day in and day out how opportunities and doors are closed on our face. I shut, not even closed, on our face. Being a media practitioner, for some reason, I always choose things that they say I can't do. Being a media practitioner, I was confirming to Kaya. I was the first person to interview Kaya on TV. Yeah. Being a media practitioner who's proven that I can do it. I'm about to start a new show that focuses on leadership. And I'm going to take a leave from UConnect and say, President, can you be my first guest? But the reason I'm bringing this issue is, as much as I've proven for 6 years, having the best show in a community TV station, high ratings. Today, as I start another show in a commercial TV station, I'm still faced with the same challenges, calling people who don't want to come to the show. And my challenge is, if I don't meet a deadline, they don't look at the fact that the system is against me. They will think I failed because I'm a black woman. I failed because I have a disability. And these are the challenges young women are faced with day in and day out, because the system is not on our side. And when we fail, and sometimes we are given these opportunities as a setup for failure. So we don't have luxury to fail. And these are some of the issues that we need to deal with. Let me come to a closing by saying, one of the things that we need to start doing is to give the African child a voice. Interestingly enough, today is exactly a year to the day we started ascending Kilimanjaro last year. And my claim was for the African child, because as you may know or not know, the 16th of June is also the UN Day for the African child. My claim was to say, African child, the system is against you. You are living in a system that was created to destroy you. Unless you change the purpose of the system, it will continue to destroy the African child. Because you see, you can adapt the function of a thing, but you cannot change its purpose. So as African children, wherever we go, there is something that is working against us. And my point was saying, regardless of that, African child, there is no mountain that is too high for you. Yes. Regardless of those difficult circumstances, if you want to, nobody can keep you down, because you belong in greater heights than you are made to believe. So it is that time, young people, we stand up and do things as well on our own. In my language, we say, "Omukupushiwa Lady Bushaka. You can only help an ox that helps itself. Because let me tell you, African child, when somebody does everything for you, they control and dictate your destiny. And Africans put it this way: it is easy to defeat people who cannot light their own fire. As we talk about having our land back, we need to understand what that means. That means our destiny can no longer be dictated. We need to own everything. We need, because unless we own anything, and on that note, Mr. President, as an artist or a media practitioner, we can't even own our intellectual property. We can't. For me to own intellectual property, I have to say to a station, don't pay me. Because if they pay me, they want my intellectual property. And somebody like me who's got a coordination disability, my most valuable asset is my mind. Yes. And these are the challenges of the African child everywhere we go. Look at what is happening with the Swahili word, Hakuna Matata. Somebody else says they own that. How do you own something that is somebody's language? But because somebody can dictate our destiny and we don't own resources, there's nothing that we can do. So it's about time we help the African child to have a voice. But African child, you need to also stand up on your own. Don't just expect hand out. Just expect a hand up. Those are two different things. Let me end by quoting Pastor Nomur when he said, "First they came for the socialists. I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jew, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." My point is, you cannot only speak on issues that affect you, because diversity is protection. When you want protection as a society, you have to stand up for everybody, because none of us is self-sufficient. None of us has everything, and none of us has nothing. We all have something to contribute in society. Then our society will stand together and we all play our part. Thank you.
The mic is higher than me. What's happening? Yeah. Yes. The Honorable President, Cyril Ramaphosa, honorary dignitaries and officials, distinguished guests, greetings to you all. As I've been introduced, yes, it's true, Kamagwini is my first name. And then I usually go by Kanya with friends and family, you know. And then on social media, I'm Nomangongo, all of which are on my green book, all those names. And in July, after my birthday, I'll be saying I'm the age of the South African democracy. Yeah, 25. Yeah. Speaking to born frees now. I don't take our democracy lightly. I don't ever take it lightly, more especially every struggle hero that took the initiative to continue fighting the plight of freedom. Be it in the forefront, mediating, or in the background, all those roles. I believe that today I'm able to speak before masses, and that's why I'll always say I am, because they were. But today I wanted to talk about a man named Simon Goli, an anti-apartheid queer, youth, and HIV or AIDS activist who started his journey of activism with the Congress of South African Students, otherwise known as COSAS. I am an activist, and that's why actually I wanted to bring it back home, you know. But because of limited time, I'd advise that you please go and read about Simon Goli and what he did, his role in our history. But what I can take from his life, Mr. President, is that the revolution continues to be intersectional, that representation matters, and that silence is violence. What I mean by intersectionality is that the different constructs in society, your race, your class, your gender, can't be isolated from one another because they affect one another. Comrade Ngoli was gay, was black, was young, was an activist, was HIV positive, and all these constructs never made it easy for him to live and navigate among society. He had to work against the current, and he did. He created support systems, groups that consisted of people facing similar challenges because they can relate well with one another. He fought for space, and in him we see the same spirit carried by the youth of 1976, the spirit of resilience. Today, those support formations for queer beings are there, but they need to broaden their vision and their focus a bit. Queer beings are sidelined at schools, at home, and in workplaces. But that's even if they do get a job, because judgment starts in the interview room. Queer beings always have to go the extra mile to validate themselves, in attire, in action, in what they say, because society is not that welcoming. These are just some of the disadvantages that come with being queer. We are often disappointed, Mr. President, we being young queer bodies, when we look at how certain offices, boards, committees are structured without queer representation. And we wonder if our plight is any different to that of women, young women, or beings who are differently abled and seek representation in these formations. Unemployment is an ongoing issue, and not only does it affect the youth, but it trickles down to those social constructs I've mentioned earlier, which disadvantages many. We've had to argue that the South African Constitution is progressive in having same-sex marriages legalized. But queer couples still face discrimination in some home affairs departments, with officials who have the right to choose whether they want to or they don't want to marry these couples. But let's park that a bit. Transgender people wait up to 7 years to get their status changed on their identity documents. One of the problems with this is that the person cannot leave the country to receive gender alignment surgery because of the difference between their identity document and how they physically present. So the South African government doesn't provide also the healthcare accessibility for these situations. But when one tries to access it in another country, they are blocked. We have long said that ideally, South Africa would make allowance for a third gender as an option like X or just blank. We are not convinced that gender as an identifier plays such a big role that supersedes the dignity of transgender South Africans. In the short term, we say to this difficulty, hiring queer people, transgender people in particular, in the Home Affairs and the healthcare offices will ensure that issues that relate to gender health and amendments in one's legal identification will not be such a traumatic and humiliating process for the parties involved. These are also just one of the many burning issues queer bodies experience daily. Let me conclude by saying that queer bodies need to also be found in the education sector. And I always listen to a very great friend of mine when she says that basic education is where we can spread any form of propaganda we'd like to spread. And that's where because that's where they are still organized. You can just quickly brainwash them quickly with something. But it depends how you're going to use this propaganda, right? I lose myself. And we need to use this to our advantage, yes, for the sake of an open-minded, non-judgmental generation. And this is for generations to come as well. And that is where these experiences need to be shared, especially if we can agree that we live in a continuously evolving world. We need to be able to share in spaces like life orientation, for example, the different experiences of queer beings as couples and parents, their form of reproduction, etc. It must not just be to heterosexual couples. The propaganda doesn't have to only exist in basic education, but everywhere we go, we need to be on the right side of history for those experiencing this journey head on. And to further empower your knowledge to this propaganda, go out and do some research, of course, on queer beings, the lifestyle, and how your existence can assist their lives. I also believe that workshops for people in workplaces are also necessary to monitor the fairness and equality of treatment to queer bodies. Ask, ask, ask. There's nothing wrong with asking if you don't know, just ask, instead of assuming and then further offending a queer body. We need to be deliberate and persistent in our consistent support for queer bodies, and this has to start somewhere. And Mr. President, I'm glad that you are here because you get to call the shots anytime. And so I think, yes, even though maybe we may be late to the party, but it also has to start with us. So let the propaganda begin. Amanda.
Thank you very much, Amakwini. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the panel that represents different interests of young people across the country. And I must say, President, we deliberately left out the youth political formations because we feel that youth political formations are represented in Parliament. We are going to talk to Parliament tomorrow. They are there. We said, let's talk to young people from different sectors to be able to really, so that we get a broader perspective of what young people are actually saying. Now, we are not within time. Ne? I did not want to stop them as they were talking. And I understood that some of them went longer than what they were supposed to go. But I then also understood it's not every day that you speak to the president. Yes. But we are going to change things around so that we allow the president to respond. There are two things we are going to do. One, here I'm going to take 3. But 3 in this manner. Masingita spoke about diversity. So we must also have a diversity of views. Ne? And I can see we're quite diverse here. So we must also have that diversity. So I'm going to be strict on that one. Then the last thing we're going to do, I'm going to call 2 ministers. Because this can't just be a talk shop. As Kolome, let's talk, Felicia Mabuza, Sakel. No. 3 talk with Nolin. This these ministers are going to come and pledge something for you seated here. They are going to do it. One minister is Minister Kumbutso Nchaven, the Minister of Small Business Development. Another minister, hey, President did well, created a minister and said labor and employment. So we need to know labor and employment through pledging. So that so these two ministers are going to do that. And then tonight's NYDA, when we close, will also do that. So 3 hands. Let me see them. Oh no, it's okay. Don't worry, President. I'll take 3 only. There can be too many, but I'll take 3. You there? Yes, you are number 1. There with the cap. You are number 2. I was very clear on diversity. I don't play. And then the lady with lime. You lime, yeah. You are number 3. So let's have number 1. Let's move up. Is the mic on?
Hello.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I never thought I'd actually say that. But in reference to the history of South Africa, the BBBEE policy was implemented to rectify the horrid injustices of apartheid. However,
your name, Baba. Can you give us your name, please? Yeah.
My name is Flynn.
Flynn. Okay.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
The BBBE policy was implemented to rectify the horrid injustices of apartheid. However, this policy has been in place now for approximately 25 years or so, and you mentioned a few months ago whilst campaigning for the recent elections that you do not want young people to become unemployed or to leave the country due to them not getting a job. So do you reckon that the affirmative action policy will ever come to a natural end, or will it carry on indefinitely?
All right, thank you. Number 2, diversity. We don't play. Number 2, Lisa. Continue.
My name is Cyril Jacobs. Ek is 'n jeugaktivis van Oudtshoorn. Die eerste ding wat ek wil sê, meneer President, is dat die tyd nou aangekom het waar free sanitary towels beskikbaar sal wees vir jong meisies in skole in ons gemeenskappe. Want ons moet beseker maak dat ons meisiekinders hulle dignity het en nie hulle dignity verkoop aan die places en die sugar daddies wat daar is. Dat ons mense en ons jong meisies exploiting. So I think it's time that we need to address that particular issue. But what I want to speak to is the issue of land and the issue of using land for integrated human settlements. I come from a community of outplay, and last year I went on a hunger strike, Mr. President, to get your attention. And I think I want to speak to the issue of the roles of our different spheres of government, and the fact that there needs to be, for me, a more accountability in terms of the role where national government holds those other 2 spheres of government more accountable. Because here in the city of Cape Town, in the Western Cape, we are being failed in terms of housing opportunities to our people, and we can't continue to have apartheid spatial planning continuing as if it is normal within Cape Town, and that is what perpetuates gang violence, that's what perpetuates racism. The last thing, Mr. President, on the issue of drugs. Drugs is a business, Mr. President. The only way we are going to address the scourge of drug abuse amongst young people is if we are able to offer alternative programs to young people that are going to have the interest of young people. Now, as a youth activist here, I have youth programs within my community, but I don't get support from the city of Cape Town, from the Western Cape provincial government. I'm currently trying to raise 100,000 rand to ensure that we can continue our after-school programs, our support for sports program, as well as arts and culture programs. So I would want to also appeal, like the panelists next to you, that you'd also assist us and maybe encourage South Africans to support these type of initiatives. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Azola Ndongeni. Mr. President, I am fully much aware that issues of unemployment and other issues which are faced by the older group of young people, they keep you so busy that you forget that in the wing of young people falls children in this country who directly, proportionally also have issues which we face. Children are not fully protected. We have child protection issues. Children are not fully represented in democratic forums. There is no child in that panel discussion. So tomorrow, I want to hear you address how you will strengthen Chapter 2, Section 28 of the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ministers, can we get the microphone to the Honorable Minister? Very young, beautiful. You know, President, it was once said that the government delivers, but we move at the pace of an elephant. Now we need to start moving at the speed of a cheetah. And it's ministers like that one that give us hope. What do you have for us?
Thank you, Chairperson, Executive Chairman. I think what maybe before we pledge, we need to, there are issues that were raised that we think we need to maybe talk to briefly, is the issue of incubation. We are repositioning CEDA to be the lead incubator of South Africa, not of government, of South Africa. Why we want to do that? We want to bring all the incubation initiatives, both in government and private sector, under one roof so that we can maximize the impact that we make on young people and ensure that young people in Amulepo, in Ashkunda Malema, in Ashkundi, they can also have access to incubation and not those close to St. on the slow and all the other incubation that are available in St. So that is what we are doing. But also to link to that, we are changing how we support small businesses. Because the emphasis, Mr. President, after you appointed me, I received a phone call and from the dearest mother. She says, it's not the smallness of things that you must focus on, it's the development of the small businesses that you must focus on. Why we do that? Because the informal business must graduate to become small, the small to medium, medium to large. And we must track how much we are graduating them into the next category. And to do that, we are going to start here. We are going to fund 43 young entrepreneurs and innovators as part of marking the 43rd year since the June 16 massacre in Soweto and the country over. How we are going to get that? There are commitments or young people the President celebrated during June 16. We are starting with them. There are those who visited in the stall, we are starting with them. And then we'll go to the catalog of the NYDA and top up on that to make sure that we support them. Because we want to support their growth. And we have only one condition. They must at least have the potential to create 10 jobs. Why we say they must have the potential? It's not about whether they're creating those jobs. We want to support them to create at a minimum 10 jobs. Because our responsibility is not to get them when they're ready, but to get them to become ready to do what they're supposed to do. Because small, medium enterprises are the catalyst for inclusive economy, and we are going to ensure that it's done in our lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister Ngesi.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson, President, and panelists. Colleagues, you know the President has indicated that this government is serious about this issue of unemployment, especially for the youth, to the extent that there has been a reconfiguration. We are now Department of First Correction, Labor and Employment and Labor. But like the minister before me, just to mark this 43 years, we have created 43 positions in the department, between level 5 and 8. And the levels 5 to 6 are requiring no experience or pre-qualifications. Level 7 to 8 would be subject to the public service required qualifications. But to also ensure transparency and equal opportunity, the 43 will be drawn from a pool of the unemployed youth and placed objectively through the employment services system of South Africa, which seeks to match these candidates against the opportunities offered by the employers. This also involves the process of the career development. Thank you.
Can I see hands of entrepreneurs here? So is the whole world, we are all entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
Can I see unemployed graduates? Right. 43 new jobs have been declared here in the department. 43 new business to be funded by the department right here. Commemorating 43 years since the 1976 student uprising. This is only the beginning. Everything else, I think the President will address. With those few words, would like to welcome His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. Please just stand up.
Thank you, thank you. Ayeye, young people, ayeye.
Ayeye.
Heita, young people, heita.
Heita da.
Hola, young people, hola.
Hola da.
Oh, thank you. Well, let me thank you, Chairperson of the NYDA and ministers who are here and deputy ministers and my fellow panelists who are here and leaders of various formations amongst young people. This, for me, has proven to be more than an honor and a real privilege to be here in your midst, in your presence. I have thoroughly gained a lot from being amongst you, and I thank you dearly. I particularly want to thank the chairperson of the NYDA for making all the arrangements together with the staff in my office for me to be here. I continue to be quite amazed and taken in by the chairperson of the NYDA, not only for his brief moment of demonstrating Ivosho for me, because he only did it once. And I did the rest on Saturday and showed him how good I am at it all. I demonstrated that I'm good at it. You say, no, I can't dance. You don't have that in common with me. I do thank you indeed. And this engagement happens just on the eve of SONA. And I've picked up quite a number of issues which I'm sure you would like us to address tomorrow. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over some of the issues that you have raised. What I would like to say, though, is that 25 years into our democracy, the breakthrough that one of you spoke about, we have a situation in our country where the youth are facing a real challenge, almost a crisis, in fact, a crisis. But at the same time, they have a government which has a bias for the development of young people. The governing party has always said it has a bias for the working class, And you have a government that has a bias towards the development of young people. But you also have a government that is not only willing, but also prepared to listen to young people, to listen to their views, to listen to their inputs, to listen to their proposals, suggestions, and everything else. Where the government falls short, I can tell you now that young people should have the courage and the determination to raise issues with government where government falls short. For instance, you have raised, and correctly so, issues such as when the stimulus package was crafted, you too should have been involved. And I think you are right. We should have found a way, a form in which you can also get involved so that you don't only come from the left wing and from the tail end to want to get involved. One of the things that you raised quite prominently as young people is that you too want to get involved at a fairly early stage. For instance, in the executive of the country, in the parliament of our country, and that is now being realized. It is happening in your own lifetime. Are you aware of it, or are you sleeping on the job? Because it is happening, and I said on Sunday that it is going to happen more and more. We are going to be having more and more of a youthful parliament. As it is now, we've got many more young people in our parliament than we have ever had. We now have many more young people in our executive and cabinet, in other words, than we have ever had. Meaning that we are open and prepared to listen to young people. Because in the end, we don't only sloganize about that the youth are the future. You are the future. Whether we like it or not, you are here to stay, and you are the future. So we say, own that future. Own that space and enter that space and make full good use of it. Because your government has its ears wide open. It has its eyes wide open, and it is open to hearing the views and the proposals of young people. Yes, we want young people to be at the epicenter of economic activity. And I'm so delighted to see here so many of you raising hands saying that you are entrepreneurs, you are young entrepreneurs. That is so pleasing to my heart. And it is for this reason that we also appointed a minister who is young, who is your peer, who understands, in small business that is, who understands precisely what it is that is happening and affects the lives of young people. I firmly believe that yes, young people are innovators. Young people are creators. Young people have got a lot of ideas. When we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution, in form and content, you have already overtaken that by leaps and bounds. And you are tech savvy, you are digi savvy, and we want you to occupy that space and lead us. And that is where your leadership is going to count. I mean, I get home every day and I'm amazed by how my children are able to show me how my computer works, how my telephone works, and all that. They say, Dad, you don't know this? And I say, no, I don't know. And they know it. And that is where we want you to display your full knowledge, because you've got the courage. Now, what we need to do, this is where you are correct. We need to open pathways. We need to create an ecosystem for young people to be able to thrive and to be creative. We do need to give you the wherewithal, the enablers to assist you as young people. Aisha, you're absolutely right. We don't need to limit at the creation. We also need to go beyond the creation of businesses that are led by young people and be able to facilitate the growth and make sure that we don't only give you the leg up or the capability to create your businesses, but we should be there, yes, to ensure that your businesses grow. Now, I enjoy the talk about incubation. Kaya spoke about it, and he referred to a particular incubation system that Donay, Nicole, and I have been involved in, which we are still tangentially involved in, where incubation, and the minister spoke about it, and I'm excited that one of you said we need to spread incubation centers throughout the country. That is very much part of our plan. We want to create incubation centers throughout the country because we've proven that incubation works. We have proven that you can grow small and medium enterprises, and the minister wants informal businesses to grow into small businesses and medium enterprises to grow into big businesses. Is that possible? Yes, it is eminently possible. This incubation center called Black Umbrellas has won 2 awards. 2 awards in the United States, competing with incubation centers all over the world. It won 2 awards at the university. Which university was that? Stanford. Stanford University, beating American incubation centers on 2 occasions. It just recently won 1. What does it do? It brings in people with ideas, people with dreams. It brings them in, it exposes them to the ecosystem with marketing plans, business plans, accounting services, and office facilities, and mentors. And the mentors then handhold those businesses, takes them to banks, raises money, and so forth, and the businesses fly. One such business, Aisha, you say you are now going to hit 100 million rand turnover in a year. One such business, which did not exist 4 years ago, is now turning over 150 million rand and employs well over 15,000 people. It got into the incubation space and it started growing its own business. So I'm delighted that we are going to be able to spread the incubation processes throughout the country. But why would we want to do that? Because we want young people to come into that space. We want it to be fraternized by young people who have ideas, who have the courage, who have the innovation talent. And that is where we want them to be. The procurement budgets. We want young people to play in that space, to be able to get into that space and play there and not be rent seekers and not be tender chasers. They must run real businesses. They must prove that, yes, they are going to be turning over millions of rands and putting down profit after tax. Yes, we want to be able to create businesses in a way where you will be able to function easily, so that it should not take you 2 years, Aisha, to register, 2 months to register a business. You should be able to register a business in a few hours, like they do in Rwanda. In Rwanda, you arrive, you say, I want to start a business. Even if you are an outsider, you are able to start and get a business registered in all its ramifications within 1 hour. You have your business, you are ready to operate. That is where we need to start moving to. And Aisha is absolutely right in saying what we should also seek to do is to create an environment which is going to enable even investors from outside to come and invest. They must look at our country as a country that has stability, that has the wherewithal to be able to get investments planted here and to grow. where the regulatory environment is good and can enable businesses to go. At the same time, we should be able to ensure that we reduce the cost of doing business. Right now, our country has a high cost of doing business. We need to start cutting the high costs of getting things done. For instance, if you want a permit for whatever, you are required to go to some consultant, and the consultant then navigates their way for you, and thereafter you pay a lot of money. If you want this and that, it costs too much money. We've got to reduce all that, and that is what we're trying to work around, and we are going to do it. Things like work visas, because sometimes, yes, you want someone to come from Silicon Valley to come and help your business to grow. You want someone to come from, could be Malaysia or wherever. You should be able to get them to come easily on a work visa. They should not have to wait for a year before you bring them in with that skill. And so that is why we want to straighten out visa requirements so that we bring in the skills. You know, successful economies like America, when you want to go and you've got a particular know-how and skill, they say come. They say come because they want your brain power. We should also be willing to bring brain power and have the knowledge that people have being left here. And so therefore, I want to applaud Aisha for starting a business, and I've been tracking her business for quite some time, and I'm delighted that here is a young person. You're 34, 1 year short of being a real adult. Been tracking her business, and it's a joy and a wonder to keep hearing the report that she's now going to get funders who are much more serious and big-time funders to invest in a business, meaning that it's a homegrown Uber type of business. Our own homegrown Uber home services business, which has been grown here and which is now spreading out. And soon, her business will soon be spreading to the rest of the continent. It will soon be spreading around the world because it is unique. And that, for me, is what defines what young people can do. And I just want to encourage young people to think out of the box all the time, to think big, to be big dreamers and come up with a number of ideas. And possibly tomorrow we'll be challenging young people to do quite a number of amazing things, because this is your time. This is your era as young people to do the amazing things that will dazzle the imagination of the people in our country. And I want to say thank you to Kaya for referring to some of these initiatives, but he also makes a very important point. He says, make some of these things universal. For instance, Kagiso Trust and Shanduka Foundation, which was then called Shanduka Foundation, got involved with education, improving education in the Free State. And that is why in the end, yes, the Free State was able to become #1 in the country on 2 occasions, save for once when, for instance, the progressed learners were brought in. But he's right in saying, make it more universal. And that is precisely what we are seeking to do with Minister Angie Motshekga, that let us focus on improving education at the district level and make sure that our teachers, the teachers in our schools, are properly prepared, trained, where we bring them together with the parents and also with young people, with all various formations of young people, to work together to improve schools. Now, Free State has been able to accede to that. We will be able to spread that process throughout the country. And I'm also particularly pleased that he refers also to the system that we have in helping young people. The other one for me, which is most exciting, is how we were able to put together the South African Actuarial Development Program, where we were able in a focused way, after finding out that there's not a single, except for one, single black African actuary in the country, we created this facility. And today, the South African Actuarial Development Program is just training young people who it headhunts in various schools to become actuaries. Young, black, meaning African, Indian, colored, including white, are all involved in being assisted to become actuaries in our country. And the same thing can happen with others. You cite that CETAs must get involved in developing all these skills, and that is important. You also talk about the cost of boarding, and we need to link properly the world of learning and the world of work. All those linkages need to be put in place, and that is precisely what we are going to be doing. And as one of you said, we now also need to work on that linkage. One of you said so a minute ago, that linkage between theoretical and practical. Was it you? It was you. The theoretical and practical, and you articulated it so eloquently. I met with Chancellor Angela Merkel, because in Germany, that is the done thing. They mix theoretical and practical. We de-link the two. We're now going to move towards linking the two. And we want the private sector to get involved with us in linking the two, so that young people, as they learn the theoretical part, can immediately have the linkage with the practical part. When they finish schooling or finish their academic learning, they must be job ready. So that this issue of experience must immediately disappear completely, as well as the cost of boarding. Boarding meaning that employers are concerned about bringing young people on board because they have to teach them the job and so on. So this process, which I'm glad you've articulated, and this is another area where we'll listen. We'll listen to you, and I don't know what you're going to call it now. You did fees must fall. What are you going to call this? So that one too, we are going to listen to very, very closely. Yes, of course, Anissa, youth unemployment is a crisis. And we've got quite a number of initiatives that we want to generate. And in the end, we've got to work with the private sector. We've got to crowd the private sector in to create spaces for young people to get jobs. Now, we started the Youth Employment Service. Now, we had hoped that it would have brought in many, many young people, but it's in these formative stages, and it is going to gain momentum as it goes on. But we're also finding that those young people who come into the Youth Employment Service for a year, almost 90% of them are immediately able to get jobs. They're immediately able to get jobs, moving from the learning part and the job opportunity part, they get jobs. Now we want to massify this. We want to embark on a number of other initiatives. The Gauteng government has the TSEPO 1 million. The TSEPO 1 million is also beginning to yield a number of wonderful benefits. Chairperson Mutsweni, you say we must make the National Youth Service compulsory. I'd love that. But right now, the cost of putting it in place, and we've been trying to build a number of models. When we finally get, and it's going to happen soon, and Minister Kwana Mashabane is going to convene the meeting, which I will chair, of the National Youth Working Group. When we finally get to sit down, we will talk about the compulsory National Youth Service. Right now, the model that we've been toying around with is quite expensive. And we've had to see what choices we can make, because we've had to offer and make sure that free education gets going. And at the same time, we need to look at the National Youth Service, and we've got to do a balancing act. But we will find solutions, because in the course of time, we will be listening more and more to what young people are saying. And it's possible that the models that we are building are the types of models that young people can also try and amend. And in fact, we will never do anything without your involvement. So we are going to discuss precisely this point that you are making about the compulsory National Youth Service. I admire what Connect is doing, Mama Bolu. I admire Connell, what he's doing with his, I met him for the first time. I always watch him on television nearly every day. Met him for the first time with his philanthropic work. And for me, it is very touching to see young people who, as they become successful, are immediately able to set up their own foundations to help other people who are less off. Yes. For a young person like him to have already built a fully fledged library in Limpopo and is now working on another initiative requires a great deal of applause and acknowledgement. And I thank you for it. It really does. But he also goes beyond that, and he wants to demonstrate care and compassion for people in the industry, that they should be protected. He talks about the contracts that need to be properly drafted, and yes, even building more theaters. And I love to hear that, because we need to transform our rural areas and our townships. We need to make sure that they are not dormitories where people just go and sleep and go and work in the city areas. We need to transform the areas where our people live. There should be areas where people trade, where they do business, where they manufacture stuff, and where they also have great moments of leisure. Now, where we all grew up in the townships and all that, those facilities are not there. And we now need to create those facilities as we deal with the apartheid spatial architecture landscape. We need to be building those theaters and making sure that there are great experiences that our people can go through. Masingita, my sister, I just love what you do. I mean, I dream of going to Kilimanjaro. Now, in my life, it is still to climb. You have summited. I'm still dreaming of going to climb it. You have summited, and I'm overawed about that. And Chairperson Mutsweni, let me correct you. Let me correct you. You referred to people living with disabilities. No, it's not people living with disabilities. And I was corrected once when I referred to that when I met people from the Council of Disabled People. They said, we're not living with disabilities, we are disabled. And so let's correct that language so that we are politically correct. But to hear that disability is a diversity, for me, that is heartwarming, because it should help us to relate to disabled people in a way where we respect them with dignity, and where we go beyond that as well, where we also begin to say, how best can we create opportunities, open pathways for them? Now, in government, as we met with the people from the organization that represents their views, we also spoke about job opportunities, how we can ensure that in government, and indeed in the private sector as well, that opportunities are open for them, that they are properly empowered across gender lines, that disabled people are brought into employment, not only in government, but also in the private sector, so that they become economically active and they have healthcare facilities, but more importantly, that we make our buildings friendly and functional for people who are disabled. Because our buildings are still structured in a way where they are not helpful for people who are disabled. So that for me was quite comforting. And Kanya also speaking about the spirit of resilience and making us become aware about the situation of people who are from the LGBTI plus community, people who she calls queer beings. And that is important for us to get it into a national psyche, that we've got to, one, be tolerant, be fully understanding, and be able to be accepting to people who are different from everyone else, because they are human beings like us. And so therefore, that is important for us, and that this discrimination, particularly for transgender people, should also come to an end, and there should be no judgmental approach to people who are like that. But all in all, I want to conclude by saying, I have found this engagement most empowering. Empowering in the sense that it opens up our minds, our thought processes, also about what we need to address. Many of the things we'll be able to take up and take forward when we engage in the National Youth Working Group, because that is a channel or a forum where young people's views are going to be properly articulated, where they are going to be heard. And we've now reached an era where we will not ever be able to do things about young people without their involvement. So I can assure you that nothing about you without you. Nothing about young people without their active participation. And in fact, we want to be able to take the lead from what young people are going to be able to articulate. The key thing, of course, is going to be addressing the challenge of unemployment. What I find most concerning is the fact that quite a number of young graduates, people who've got their degrees and their diplomas and their certificates, who are sitting at home. We have said that we want to have a national register of all those young people so that they are on the radar screen continuously, so that we are able to find pathways for all those young people. This message was made very clear to me and many other leaders when we went around campaigning in the last election. As we went from household to household, the one message that was continuously recurring from parents was that our children are educated, our children do not have jobs, and Mr. President, can you make sure that our children do get employment? Now, there were 2 or so questions which have disappeared from my system here. The one I remember very clearly was the issue of affirmative action. Will affirmative action ever come to an end? Now, that's an interesting question. We need to ask ourselves, let me just say our trajectory towards correcting the imbalances of the past is the following. We say we want to build a non-racial, non-sexist, prosperous, and democratic South Africa. Those are the 4 issues that are our nation's mission. We want to rid our country of sexism. It's never ever going to be a one-day affair. It's never ever going to be a 25-year agenda. It's almost a lifelong type of agenda, where we will continuously have to say we want to rid this country of sexism. We want to rid our country of racism. We want to have prosperity in our country. We should never ever say we will rest on trying to have prosperity in our country. Similarly, on issues where the ravages of oppression and inequality still exist, we can never say it is enough. We did it for 25 years. Even if it's still there, let us now stop, because we've done it for 25 years. Inequality, racism, sexism are processes that we need to eradicate from the face of South Africa. So we are going to continue with, yes, affirming those who are still negatively affected by inequality. Now, we live in the most unequal country in the world. The Gini coefficient of our country is the highest in the whole world. And our constitution declares that we need to ensure that we embark on programs that are going to bring about equality for the people of South Africa. And those programs are multifaceted, and we need to continue engaging in those programs. One of the young people stood up there and said, are we going to talk about, I think you were saying section 2.82 of the Constitution. Did I hear it correctly?
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. Yes, we will want to address that because it is important that we should address issues such as that. Yes, you will hear us addressing that as well. There was one other question which I wrote down and it got wiped off, and that's why I need continuous, the what? Yes, the issue of land. You addressed the issue of land, particularly here in Cape Town and in the Western Cape. Is there anything that we can do so that people have land to live in? That is a matter that through our Ministry of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation, we're going to be addressing, because there is a constitutional provision that gives provincial government the right to participate, including local government to some extent. We want to be able to work together in a cooperative way with government. Now, we had a good meeting with the Premier of the Western Cape discussing one and other issues like that, and we think we are going to have good cooperation where we will be able to address issues of land, and where we will be able to make land parcels available so that we can roll out housing. Housing is one of those issues that are in short supply in our country, and as government, that's precisely what we want to be addressing. Let me conclude then by saying, I would like to thank you all for this wonderful opportunity on the eve of SONA, and we will obviously be addressing the issue of young people quite extensively in the address, because it is a burning platform. That is not the only burning platform. Our economy, the performance of our economy is another issue that we need to address. So the many issues that you have raised, creating jobs for young people, business opportunities for young people, and all those other things, including education for young people, are matters that we are indeed going to be focusing attention on. But we will be doing it in a way of galvanizing the entire South African nation to rally around those challenges so that we can have them addressed and resolved. Our journey is still quite long, but we have come from a journey of 25 years. And in the 25 years, we have achieved a great deal. And young people are at the center of much of what we have achieved. We've celebrated Youth Day, 43 years of Youth Day. And in that, we recognize the role that has been played by young people. Young people embark on a really gigantic struggle to make sure that we get where we are. So we will be doing a lot of things in honor of the resilience, the courage, and the commitment of young people. And we will be addressing the issues that young people face, because young people are the future, and we have no choice but to address all those issues. With that, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa. Thank you very much for your response to the issues that the youth of this country has raised today. We truly appreciate, President, that indeed it is a new dawn, because we are now doing things differently. The ability, President, for you to avail yourself a day before the State of the Nation address to listen to young people in this country, to us is quite encouraging. We are encouraged, President, that indeed tomorrow looks brighter than today. Indeed, President, we are very touched about the fact that you are saying this government will be biased to the youth of this country. Youth constitute the majority of the people of this country, and we should be biased to the youth of this country. And we are very happy, President, to hear you. Because sometimes people don't understand that the other issues have been attended to. Ne? Issues of pension, old age fund, there's grants that they are there. They've been resolved. We just need to come back and make sure that we look after the youth of this country. And the youth of this country must reach their full potential. All of us, we've got different skills, we've got different capabilities. And we're very happy today that the President of the Republic of South Africa is saying to all of us that South Africa that is going to lead is a South Africa of prosperity. It's a South Africa where all of us will have an opportunity to meet our full potential. So we thank you very much, President. President, when the two ministers made pledges here, we also received another pledge. Firstly, Aspen has now agreed to work with us as the NYDA, and has also come in to say they will assist 43 young people as Aspen as part of commemorating the 43rd anniversary of June 16, 1976. We also have President Ibileng Mkari, the chairperson of the Property Owners Association, has also said they will give young people 43 opportunities through internships in that particular forum. So we're thankful for that. This means now that gap between us and the private sector is starting to close. We want the private sector to come on board, lead by example. Aspen is showing you, and Mr. Mkari is showing you. Let's all come together, because if all of us can make a small contribution, this country will indeed become a better place. So we thank you for that. We also thank you, ministers, minister in the presidency for women, youth, and the disabled. President, I'm a quick learner, I'm a student. Persons who are disabled. Now, we thank you, ma'am, Deputy Minister, thank you very much for your support. You've come into the office just over a month, or less than a month, but the support that you have shown the NYDA so far has been tremendous. And yes, so far, we're going step by step. It may stop at some point and we may have to say other things, but so far, we're very happy. And